We imagine that education should be this realm of free inquiry. A friend of mine actually says that, oh, you work in academia, that's like the most dangerous place in America for free speech. That's what he tells me, which sounds exactly wrong.
I think this really goes back to what Caroline and I were seeing when we started working in Detroit. We were newly married and we were seeing a lot of cloudy thinking.
I have taught in the public school system for 10 years. The environment when I first started was very different than the environment I left.
The world has now sort of placed its meaning and identity and power and hope in these certain things, and it's really scared that if we ask the wrong questions, we will find answers that threaten those things.
I sensed the apathy was growing very deep and wide in our student body.
How do we get to a point where people are not educated to make wise decisions?
Public ed feels like it's now the site that is scared to ask those questions.
They needed to have an answer to the why of what we were learning, and in that context, I couldn't give them that answer.
And it goes all the way back to what education should be, which has been a question people have been asking for thousands of years.
And even when universities were first constructed by Christians, Christians are now supposed to be these stodgy people who want to clamp down on what you're allowed to say, right? But today it's like the exact opposite, right? And it's like the Christians and people at Christian schools who really feel free to follow the data to what it actually says and to ask, the serious questions no matter where they may lead.
God has set up the world in such a way that if you follow the laws he set up, you're going to be happier. If you're going to start rejecting those, you're going to have to reject truth all around you. Sin is inherently a distrust of God. If I want to turn away from God's law and I turn towards sin, then automatically I've rejected truth right there and I want to continue rejecting it, right?
Because it is true in some way that is really hard to make precise, that when people get trapped in long-term sin patterns, their thinking starts getting worse. And not just in the one topic they're sort of trapped in sin on, but their thinking just gets worse across the board.
And we all have sin wrapped up in our hearts. And so when we are confronted with truth, our first response may be to fight against it somehow or explain it away or put another spin on it so that it doesn't rub up against us.
I mean, this is like the famous children's story where you make one lie thinking you'll get out of a problem and then it snowballs into a bunch of bigger lies. David sees Bathsheba and lies to himself that he deserves her, and then that leads to adultery and murder and all these problems in his life. Then you're a slave to the lie, right? You either have to keep it up or you have to admit, I was totally wrong on all this stuff. The earlier you get into those lies, then the harder it is to get out of it.
Which then leads to a lot of relativism, leads to a lot of people saying, well, that's true for you, but it's not true for me, and then leads a lot of people in the world to think there is no real truth. It hides the truth behind all of that mess. There are truths that can be known that we don't like, they don't feel good. That doesn't change the truth value of that thing. It just makes us wrestle with it. And some people aren't willing to wrestle with it.
Good. Make sure those legs stay straight. This is an exercise in what fruit of the Spirit?
Patience.
Patience, and then the big one that's important in physical education, Evelyn.
Self-control.
Self-control. So, do a croucher. No, you know this.
Most people in the darkness or who don't understand don't want to have their minds changed. It's very uncomfortable. It hurts the eyes when you come out into the bright light. Plato describes this as being locked in a cave where you can only see vague shadowy images and being brought out into the sunlight where you can see the world.
Because our final hopes and really the most important things we believe to be true are rooted in God, that gives us the freedom to sort of ask any question we want to ask about the world and not be scared of what the answer might be.
As I'm teaching, I like to ask hard questions, and I like the students to ask hard questions back. And there are sometimes, lots of times actually, I don't know the answer.
Christians are truth-centric people, right? Not power-centric people. A lot of the world today is power-centric people, but we are truth-centric people, so we never need to be scared of the data. We can always be willing to look at it.
So that brings assurance that even if there's hard questions being asked, they're not scary, and students should be asking hard questions, and they might be asking the same hard question for years of their life, and that's okay.
There's a spiritual reality to it as well, in that I was dead and I was trapped in darkness. When I know the truth, Jesus says that I am the truth. I am set free from captivity, the captivity of sin and darkness, and now I am set free to live as a child of God. The quickest way to decide if education is successful is to see what it's aimed at. And what we're aimed at is a good life. So we want students who go out into the world and they're ready to fight and slay dragons. They're ready to take on evil in the world as a service to the people around them and as a way of serving God.
My greatest hope for my students is that when they graduate, that they will love God, that they will love their neighbor, that they would seek to serve others gladly, with joy.
They need to know who God is, who they are in relation to Him. They need to know how to operate in the world. They need to know what real love is so that they can love their neighbors. Then they also have to have the courage and virtue to act.
One effect of going through Cedar's education is that students really do know many things well, right? And that when you do know many things well, you can be helpful to other people your whole life long.